Hi, this is Title 10. I believe I made a little promise to show you a Dateline report from 1992. And just because I kind of learned my lesson with this Soylent Green clip, I don't own the rights to any of this. Not the commercials, not the Dateline report. Heck, I don't even think I own the VHS. The TV's mine. So, without further ado, here it is.
I went from one of the elite to considered a knight.
Mike Tuffarella, a career non-commissioned Navy officer until he spilled the beans.
Elevator door open, and there was psychiatric ward. I mean, literally shock took over my body.
Denise Kirkland, a doctor at an Arkansas Air Force hospital, until she blew the whistle.
I was told by my supervisor that the hospital commander was ordering me to go to Wilford Hall in San Antonio, Texas for a psychiatric evaluation.
Is the military using forced psychiatric care as a weapon against whistleblowers? That's our story tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Chris Wallace.
It sounds like something out of the Soviet Gulag. Officials trying to discredit troublemakers by sending them off to mental wards. But the stories we're going to tell you about tonight are not from the bad old days of the Soviet Union. No, they are recent cases of alleged abuse in the U.S. military. The charge is that American military commanders have tried to shut up whistleblowers, servicemen and civilians who allege wrongdoing, by ordering them to undergo psychiatric evaluation. The whistleblowers say that even if they're given a clean bill of mental health, the stigma attached to the incident damages their career, and more important, sidetracks their complaints about wrongdoing. Some of the people who have allegedly been hurt this way, doctors complaining about unsafe conditions in military hospitals, military and civilian inspectors who reported financial irregularities, and even a sailor who questioned U.S. policy in the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon says despite all these charges, it does not know of any case where commanders use the mental health system to silence whistleblowers. But, as Nightline's Dave Marish reports, the allegations keep coming.
I spent 23 years in the military.
Mike Tuffarella was a natural lifer, a Navy career non-com whose service was long and full of honors.
Navy Achievement Medal, 5 Good Conduct Awards, several medals for combat duty in Vietnam, Presidential Unit Citation, Meritorious Unit Citation.
As a youngster, Mike fought in Vietnam.
I was on the river patrol boats, and also I wasn't really satisfied with that. I volunteered for ground duty with the Army.
Mike has snapshots and memories of his heady days on the battlefield, but
I don't have nightmares about Vietnam, but I tell you one thing, I do have nightmares about being incarcerated by my own people in that mental ward.
Mike Tuffarella's sanity became an issue only after he became a whistleblower. Chief Petty Officer Tuffarella was in charge of payrolls at the Dallas Naval Air Station. At least twice, he says, whole units of reservists were fully paid even though they had done no training.
The regulations were clearly being violated. The records were doctored up. They were annotated to indicate the people were actually present when in fact they weren't.
Tuffarella complained to his superiors and was told,
"Mind your business, shut your mouth." Well, I would not be quiet because I knew it was wrong.
After repeated reports up the line, Tuffarella was summoned to a meeting on the problem. But before the session at the base executive officer's office had begun,
I was taken and escorted by 2 Marine guards, placed in a military vehicle, and we headed somewhere north.
Their destination, the psychiatric ward of a military hospital in Wichita Falls, Texas.
If you ever saw the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I mean, that was the exact image. There was bars on the windows, a steel door, nurses in an enclosed glass casing. And I walked out there and I sat down and I put my feet up on a chair. And I looked down at my feet and I saw happy faces on my slippers. I mean, totally humiliating.
Mike wasn't crazy. The psychiatrist who saw him 3 days later determined that. And the Navy, in a letter to him mailed 3 years later, admitted as much. Admitted, in fact, that his original complaint had been absolutely correct. But Mike says the damage was done.
Once I got back to the base, literally no one would speak to me. The stigma of spending a few days in a mental ward and then coming back to your home base, people actually think that, well, maybe he is crazy.
Mike Tuffarello quit the Navy he loved, and he says his life has never been the same. An attorney who handles whistleblower cases says Tuffarello's is no isolated experience.
I am aware of approximately 100 cases.
Reporter Ed Timms of the Dallas Morning News conducted a 3-month investigation into the psychological abuse of military whistleblowers.
People said it happened to me in 1940, it happened to me in 1950, all the way up to the present. It's something that apparently has been a part of the military system for some time now.
Dr. Denise Kirkland's confrontation with the military mental health system ended just last year. Today, she's a civilian doctor, tending patients at Cabell Huntington Hospital in West Virginia, a place where she says lives are saved. A lost life triggered her whistleblowing against the Air Force Hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas.
A patient was brought to our emergency room, diagnosed appropriately as having a heart attack, treated properly, and then put in the Air Force's ambulance and transferred to the local VA hospital. However, the nurse didn't know how to turn on or operate the defibrillator, so that when the man went into ventricular fibrillation, he died.
Died in the ambulance?
Died in the ambulance.
From one hospital to the other?
Yes.
Dr. Kirkland says there were other life-threatening deficiencies at the Little Rock Air Force Base Hospital, and that she reported them to her superiors, including the base commander.
He said to me, Denise, I don't think it's medicine that you're here about. I think what you need is a man.
Dr. Kirkland says she was insulted by this response, but not silenced. But when repeated reports up the chain of command were ignored, she attempted to resign. Within 48 hours, she was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Its purpose? Confirmed, she says, by the examining psychiatrist.
Essentially, it would have been a way for the Air Force administration to say this physician was obviously crazy, and her allegations are just those of a crazy person.
Sustaining these abuses, critics say, are two systemic differences between the way the military mental health system works and civilian systems.
A civilian person cannot be placed into inpatient psychiatric hospitalization unless there is a clear and present danger that the person is dangerous, is mentally ill.
Military personnel have been hospitalized simply on the orders of their commanding officer. In the civilian world, almost anything said between a patient and a therapist is protected by strict confidentiality.
If you are a service member, there's no confidentiality. That psychiatric record can be looked at by your commanding officer or others if they determine they have a need to look at it.
Despite repeated requests for interviews, Nightline was unable to obtain any direct response to these criticisms from the Defense Department, and other investigators have fared no better. Both Congresswoman Barbara Boxer and journalist Ed Timms were told there is no problem. But Mike Tuffarello and Denise Kirkland say they know better and plan to join dozens of other whistleblowers at a national conference of people who say psychiatric care was used as a military weapon against them. I'm Dave Marish for Nightline in Washington.
When we come back, we'll talk with a whistleblower who was sent to a psychiatrist after he complained about waste in the Army. By a military analyst who says the use of psychiatric exams is not only proper, but helpful. And by a reporter who has written about the practice.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by AT&T.
Either you give your customer the best possible service, or somebody else will.
When the guy speaking for the government talks, listen to what he's actually saying. On the surface, the words sound great. Fantastic. Wow. They have to be telling the truth. But listen to what is actually being said.
You just have to wait, like everybody else. The all-new Mazda 626.
Ace Best Buys are easy to find. They're great values like these.
This Ace 60-foot garden hose is just $8.77, and this Stanley 25-foot power lock tape with free utility knife is just $9.99.
Ace Best Buys. Another reason Ace is the place.
For you.
On our This Week program Sunday, Secretary of State James A. Baker. What about aid to Russia, American troops still in Europe, the Bush campaign, and more? We'll ask. Sunday.
John Connick was the civilian chief of internal review at the U.S. Army Proving Ground in Yuma, Arizona, until he reported that Army engineers were charging foreign governments for work they never performed. The response, Connick says his superiors destroyed his report and ordered him to undergo a psychiatric exam. He was later fired on other charges. He joins us now from Phoenix affiliate KTVK. Here in our Washington bureau is military analyst James Blackwell. He defends the use of psychiatric exams, claiming they're not employed in retaliation. Also in our Washington bureau is Steve McGonigal, Washington correspondent for the Dallas Morning News. Along with another reporter, he wrote a series of stories about the military's use of psychiatric exams for whistleblowers. We also asked the Pentagon to make an official available, and they declined our invitation. Mr. Connick, as we said, you discovered what you thought was wrongdoing at an installation in Arizona. How did that get turned around in your case to your having to be forced to have a psychiatric evaluation?
Well, as chief of internal review at an Army installation, it was my job to report violations of laws and regulations. And we were able to determine, the staff and I, that they were charging direct labor hours to the French, the Germans, and the Canadians by civilian engineers who had run out of their domestic projects funding.
But specifically, sir, how did you get ordered to have a psychiatric evaluation?
First, my supervisor threatened my career, and then he eventually wrote me a letter ordering me to go to psychiatric examination.
When you say ordered, I mean, there was no question about this? What were you told?
The words were in the letter, I am ordering you to obtain a psychiatric evaluation.
And what did you think? I mean, here you were reporting what you thought was wrongdoing, and now you're being told that you may have a mental problem.
Well, I thought that only occurred in the Soviet Union. I wrestled in the World Championships in the Soviet Union in 1975, and I heard that went on. When it was happening to me, I couldn't believe it. I sought advice from various advisors.
Let's bring in Mr. Blackwell now, who, because of the Pentagon's refusal, is our stand-in for the military. Mr. Blackwell, what do you make of Mr. Connick's story and the other stories that you've heard tonight?
Well, I really can't make anything about the specific allegations that they've rendered against their superiors or against the system. I'm just not familiar with their particular cases. I would say that any system where individuals are given broad authority to give orders, to make commands, is susceptible to abuse. I mean, after all, you've got a current case in the Navy with the Tailhook Association, allegations of widespread sexual harassment. So no one's denying that there are opportunities for abuse. What I'm here to defend is the system of having command authority to refer people for psychiatric evaluations, because by and large it contributes positively to commanders maintaining morale, discipline, and cohesion in their units, in spite of some of the abuses that might have occurred.
The sense I get from what you're saying, though, Mr. Blackwell, is that you think that if this did happen in these individual cases, that they were aberrations, that there's no systematic use of psychiatric evaluation to try to derail whistleblowers.
That's correct. You know, there's all kinds of protections for individuals who turn themselves in as whistleblowers or report to the Inspector General allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse or misuse. And those kinds of protections are built into the system. If they need to be improved, then I'm all for it. But I wouldn't tear down the whole system simply because some people are making allegations and have been allowed to do that in the media forum.
Mr. McGonigal, you worked on this story for months. Is this a case, if it's all true, of a few abusive commanders, or is it more widespread than that?
Well, I think it's pretty difficult to say just exactly how widespread it is, but as you saw in your setup piece, my partner Ed Timms mentioning that we have evidence that this has gone on for decades, that it involves all branches of the military service, that it involves not just one or two kind of rogue military commanders, but a number of commanders. So I think it's impossible to put a number on this, but
I think there is ample evidence that there is a pattern of abuse here that has gone on for quite some time and continues to this day.
How do you explain it, Mr. McGonigal? I mean, what you're charging, if all these stories are true, or even a few of them are true, are U.S. military officers acting no better than the Soviet secret police. How do you explain it?
Well, I think as Jim Blackwell just mentioned, that the psychiatric system is part of both the command structure and of the overall interest by the military in maintaining order and discipline. And I think anytime you've got a soldier or a sailor or an airman who is bucking that system, that he is challenging that commander's authority to control his unit, and he is reflecting on that commander's ability, perhaps his chances for promotion. And I think the system is geared towards commanders dealing with whistleblowers and boat rockers in severe manners.
I really couldn't disagree more, Chris. The system is designed to preserve the cohesion of the unit, not the career of the commander. And if there were cases when I was a unit commander where soldiers thought that I was engaging in behavior that was unfair, uncalled for, they had all kinds of rights and procedures to bring that to the attention of my superiors, the inspector general, right to their congressman. And believe me, you can't just brush those allegations off. You can't take retribution against those kinds of actions without hurting your career in the process. So I would disagree strongly that there's any kind of structure imposing career enhancement on commanders and to keep whistleblowers quiet. In fact, I think it's structured exactly the other way.
But if I could, I'd like to answer at least a portion of that, and that is that as Jim points out, there are a number of protections on paper and in the regulations that allow whistleblowers or any other service member to talk to people, to go, for instance, to the Inspector General to prevent or to head off any sort of retaliatory behavior. I think there's also evidence that system is broken, that it is not working, and that many of the so-called watchdogs, the Inspector Generals, are not doing their job. There's considerable criticism in Congress to that effect.
Let me jump in here if I can for a minute, gentlemen. We do have to break in, but when we return, I want to ask you all what safeguards there are when a serviceman is ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. And we'll continue our discussion in a moment.
Did you catch that? It happened to him too. The VA doctors say the same shit. Oh, we have this ailment and we're dealing with it just fine. Oh, well, I don't do this, so no other provider does.
Water away as you drive. Aqua Tread, only from Goodyear. Another reason we say the best tires in the world have Goodyear written all over them.
Tony the llama is a special pet, just like your dog or cat. However, pets invite unwelcome guests into your home. Fleas. Each year, experts from ABC Pest Control visit Tony's home to apply biodegradable materials to stop the adult fleas and end their life cycle. When ABC treats your home and lawn for fleas, we guarantee it for 1 full year. For pest problems, call the professionals. At ABC Pest Control, we're conscientious and we care.
Are you waiting to buy a new refrigerator, computer, or TV because you don't want to pay for it right now and you don't want to pay high finance charges? You're biding your time, waiting and waiting and waiting. Wait a minute. Why wait? Right now, you make no payments and no interest for 6 months on everything at Best Buy. Computers, camcorders, stereos, appliances, everything. Don't wait. Now through Saturday, there's no payments or interest for 6 months on everything at Best Buy.
We hate to poke holes in your ideas of banking, but not all bankers are eager to make you a quick and easy short-term loan. That's why there's Easy Pawn.
At most Easy Pawn stores, we're open until 9, 7 days a week to make you a quick and easy loan. When you need money fast, it's easy.
Because if you haven't noticed, the hellos and how are yous of some bankers are just a lot of hot air. Easy Pawn for easy money.
The military has recruited and trained black Americans so successfully. Is there a lesson here for business and industry to learn?
The only color you see in the home is green.
Plus, a new attempt to get deadbeat dads to pay child support. Send them to work instead of jail. The American Agenda. Watch Peter Jennings on ABC's World News Tonight next week.
We continue our discussion now with former Army whistleblower John Knecht, military analyst James Blackwell, and with reporter Steve McGonigal. Mr. McGonigal, in your stories, you report big differences in the way that psychiatric evaluation works in the civilian world and in the military world. First of all, as I understand it, and set me straight on this, if a commander decides to order a psychiatric evaluation of a serviceman, he can do that on his own without going through any other kind of outside or judicial review. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And explain the significance of that in terms of the lack of safeguards.
Well, it's in the civilian system, the civilian mental health system is designed to provide for an independent arbiter, in most cases some type of magistrate, to hear both the side of the person who is being committed or being submitted for evaluation and the person who's trying to have them submitted, for the purpose of determining whether that evaluation or that hospitalization is warranted. In the military, you have the person who believes that there is a problem making the decision to submit someone to an evaluation without any kind of arbiter passing judgment on whether that's warranted.
And let's follow that up, because as I understand it, once the man has gone in for the evaluation and talked to his doctor, there's no confidentiality. The commanding officer who sent him there can now see what was said?
That's correct.
I'm not sure that's entirely correct. First of all, there is an arbiter. There's the medical professional, him or herself, to whom the soldier has been referred. And I can recall several instances when I was in command, directing people to go for an evaluation for various reasons, and the doctor calling me directly back and saying there's nothing wrong with this person. And I don't consider that to be bad if the commander doesn't take that information and abuse it and use it against the soldier.
What about this lack of confidentiality? I mean, here we have a commanding officer, at least in these cases, who is sending a man who's questioning his judgment and is sending him to for psychiatric evaluation, and then he can read what the man says about it.
I'm not so sure how much access commanders do have, and I'm just not certain of how much access they're allowed. And it's not unfettered access. They can't just say, "Give me Sergeant Doe's psychiatric file and let me read it," because it's not at all that simple. The medical system, the medical command, retains control over those files. You can get them if you need them for administrative procedures or retirement and evaluations of that sort. So I'm not denying that commanders can get it, but it's not just unfettered access.
Mr. McGonigal, what about that, Mr. McGonigal?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things at work that have to be remembered here, and that is that the doctors to whom people are being referred to are military officers themselves. They know how the military system works. They know how their own hospital works. We certainly have had evidence, to cite one example, Representative Jim McDermott, who is one of Representative Barbara Boxer's allies in trying to put in some due process protections into the military mental health system, was himself a Navy psychiatrist, and told us that there were times when he was on active duty in the Navy where people would be referred to him for evaluations, and he had suspicions about why that person was being referred to him. He did not share those suspicions with anyone else because he himself was concerned about the effect it could have on his career if he blew the whistle on a commander.
Let's bring in Mr. Knecht, who had a very serious impact on his career. Now, in your case, you had an hour evaluation, and the psychiatrist said that you were just fine. Despite that clean bill of health, was there some stigma attached to simply having been ordered to have this testing?
Let me make this one point. Prior to the examination, I had medical doctors telling the commanding officer, a layperson, that I didn't show any signs of psychiatric disease. Afterwards, the stigma's attached. People talk about it, and the rumor mill just continues to roll. And I later learned, they talked about the Inspector General being involved. I later learned by two former Inspector Generals that there was a meeting that said, don't worry about that guy in Arizona. We're going to discredit him, send him to the psychiatrist, and we're going to fire him. And these two people are willing to break the code of silence. So I disagree with Mr. Blackwell as far as, there was, in my case, there's regulations and laws in place, but they flagrantly violated them when they sent me to the psychiatrist.
Mr. Blackwell, what about that? That even if you get a clean bill of health in the tightly knit world of the military, that there's still some stigma attached to having been ordered in the first place to have this kind of evaluation?
I'm not so sure there is. I can remember referring soldiers who showed evidence of stress. The military environment is obviously very stressful, and as a commander, I felt a keen obligation to them to observe their behavior and to see if they were responding negatively to that kind of a stress. So those people who I said, hey, First Sergeant, why don't you go talk to the mental health people, just get some counseling, or go take some leave and just relieve yourself of all this stress and come back refreshed. Oftentimes they're so positive, type A, and go get them that they don't want to do that, so you refer them over there to the counseling people. I don't recall a stigma being placed against the people that worked for me when I sent them over. I tell you what I do recall. When I sat on a board of officers for an impulsive pedophile, a person who abused children, his own and others, a senior career non-commissioned officer who had medals going all the way over his shoulder, great record, but had this secret sin in his life, it was pretty good that we were able to refer him to a psychiatrist to get that clinical diagnosis, to bring that before an administrative board, quite aside from any kind of judicial proceedings or retirement boards, so that could be identified and dealt with.
Mr. Blackwell, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you, Mr. McGonigal, and Mr. Connect, all for joining us this evening. And I'll be back in a moment.
Everybody's different.
Completely different. One person works one way, another person works another.
There's no business exactly like yours, which is why IBM offers thousands of customized software programs and free seminars, all designed to help you run things your way.
You don't have anybody else to count on, to blame things on when things go wrong, but you get all the glory when things go right.
Your routine, rugged, grueling, day after day. It's even harder when athlete's foot routinely comes back. But today, there's prescription-strength Lotrimin AF. Many types of fungus can cause athlete's foot, but Lotrimin AF is a broad-spectrum medicine, so it kills them all. No wonder it's the brand most recommended by doctors. So while there's no finish line for you, there is for your athlete's foot. Lotrimin AF.
Father's Day. Dads want Dockers, Levi's Dockers, and they're all on sale at Sears. These Docker 12s are just $23.99. Shorts just $19.99. Dads want Dockers, and they're all on sale at Sears.
On June 22nd, you'll meet a sedan that's not like everybody else's. Until then, you just have to wait, like everybody else. The all-new Mazda 626.
Like to save money? You found the right place. Factory Bunk Beds can save you hundreds of dollars on fine furniture for your home. Just look at this. Save up to 65% on the best built bunk beds in town. Built extra sturdy and strong, just the way you like them. So shop around, check out the rest, then come buy the best. Stop in today and save more than ever before by buying direct from the factory and saving the middleman's profit. That's Factory Bunk Beds, where hundreds of other great deals are going on right now. All major credit.
Sunday, this week with David Brinkley, will feature Secretary of State James Baker. The topic, new treaties and the campaign season. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Chris Wallace in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a video cassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Well, there you have it. Some wax on and wax off by a military analyst. And they think they've done nothing wrong. Just thank goodness for some old technology. Otherwise, I would have never found that. But, yep. Old and reliable. Thank you for watching Title 10.